Welcome to Deloitte's Debrief Tax Webcast series in Asia Pacific. Our webcast today is from our Geography Update series and is titled Investigations and Audits under GST, Strategizing and Preparing the Businesses. My name is Hardik Gandhi and I am a tax partner based in Deloitte, India. I have the pleasure of hosting today's webcast. I have Vikram Kulkarni as my co-speaker today. Vikram is a tax director and he's also based in Deloitte, India. Vikram has served the Department of Customs, Central Excise, and has worked as an intelligence officer in the Directorate General of Central Excise Intelligence. You may access our bios on the left side of the screen. Before I introduce the agenda for today's webcast, I would like to take a moment to highlight some of the features of our webcast console. First, all users are on listen-only mode. If you have any content-related questions, you can submit at any time in the Q&A box at the bottom right of the screen. We will do our best to respond to your questions during the presentation. Second, all PC users can maximize or minimize each box at your convenience during the webcast. You may explore the icons at the bottom of the screen. If you want to download today's slides and related publications, please go to Downloads and the links box. On the other hand, mobile device users can view the slides and answer the survey on the screen. Lastly, if you require an attendance record for this event, you will receive an automated email with CPE certificate after watching for 50 minutes. Can we move on to the next slide, please? Thank you. The introduction of GST in 2017 brought upon a turbulent period for businesses in India. New legislation replaced most of the prevalent indirect taxes and introduced a uniform tax regime across the country. While the intent was good, the frequent clarifications, amendment, modifications, and couple of advanced ruling here and there in the existing legislations led to different interpretations by the tax authorities. This resulted in divergent views in the tax positions and the practices across the country followed by the tax officers as well as businesses. As the GST law and its interpretations have stabilized in due course of time, the intelligence authorities in the Department of Revenue have swung into action armed with specific information with the use of advanced technology tools such as analytics, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and so on. This has caused businesses across the country to be flooded with audits, inquiries, and investigations. Now, let me give you an overview of the topic that we will discuss in today's webcast. First, we will discuss the specialized intelligence agencies and their roles under the GST. We will talk about investigations under GST and what are the parameters that are normally followed for carrying out investigations. We will also discuss about audits under GST that are being carried out by the tax authorities and what are the parameters normally used for selecting an assessee to carry out the audit. Then we will go on to discuss as to how the businesses should prepare for audits and investigations, how should we strategize and approach such audits and investigations. We will then go on to discuss some of the common issues and concerns raised by the tax authorities during the course of such proceedings, followed with case studies and Q&A question and answers at the end. With this, I'll now hand over to Vikram to take the webcast forward. Vikram, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Hardik. Hello, everyone. Today's topic is relevant to all the businesses, irrespective of the industry or the sector which you are into. As Hardik rightly mentioned, that post-introduction of GST in July 2017, there was a lot of chaos around. Law was changed, amended, re-amended. And as a result, there was a lot of confusion. Now, this also resulted in a lot of revenue loss. Now, the field formations under the CBIC have been very active during this period. And they have detected multiple cases of tax evasion on account of various reasons. To name a few, underreporting of sales. There are unscrupulous elements who underreport the sales. They report the sales and they don't pay the taxes. Sometimes they don't report and do not pay the taxes at all. They also misuse the facility of e-way bill. Now, e-way bill is a requirement, mandatory requirement in transportation of goods. So there have been instances where one e-way bill was generated and multiple times it was used to transfer goods. And one of the most prominent issue which is being picked up by the authorities is about the fake invoices used for availing input tax credit. As a matter of fact, from July 17 till December 2022, the Revenue Department has detected more than 8,200 cases involving evasion to the tune of 620 billion Indian rupees. So therefore, it is imperative that the authorities will swung into action to plug these loopholes, to plug these gaps, and to ensure that there is no evasion or minimum evasion of revenue whatsoever. Now, before we proceed further, let us try and understand as to how the department functions, or how these, what are the arms of the Department of Revenue, which basically is involved in detection of evasion of revenue. Now, when we are talking about indirect taxes, we talk about Central Board of Indirect Taxes and Customs. Now, CBIC, in short, it has specialized agencies who have specified functions assigned to them and who deal with gathering of intelligence, conducting of investigations, etc. Now, let us know something more about these agencies. Now, as you can see on your screen, there is an agency called DRI or DGRI, that is Directorate of Revenue Intelligence. Now, this agency is primarily entrusted the job of investigation of customs duty, narcotics, and anti-smuggling related activities. Similarly, there is this agency called Directorate General of Goods and Service Tax Intelligence, DGTI in short. This agency is responsible to investigate the GST, central excise, and service tax evasion cases. Now, one thing to note here is that both these agencies, which work under the Central Board of Indirect Taxes and Customs, have got all India jurisdiction. So they can investigate any evasion case across the country wherever it has happened, and have got vast powers under the statute. However, at the local commissionerate level also, there are local anti-evasion units under each commissionerate of GST or customs. Now, the duty of these, or the job entrusted to these local anti-evasion units, is to investigate and conduct inquiries in respect of the units or businesses located within their geographical jurisdiction. So that's the basic difference between the agencies under CBIC and the unit under the jurisdiction, central GST or Customs Commissionerate. Moving on to the next slide, let us see what tasks are broadly entrusted to these agencies. Now, if we talk about DGTI, that is Director General of Goods and Service Tax Intelligence, it is an apex intelligence and investigation agency. It performs the task of collection, collation, and dissemination of intelligence relating to evasion of GST, central excise, to the field formations. It also analyzes the price structure, the marketing pattern, and classification of evasion-prone goods and commodities and services. It unearths modus operandi of tax evasion, and it also coordinates with other intelligence agencies. And in addition to that, it is also playing the role of suggesting policy measures to the Government of India, which can be introduced to amend the law if required. Similarly, DGRI, or the Directorate of Revenue Intelligence, is involved in keeping watch over important seizures and investigation cases pertaining to customs duty evasion or narcotics. It combats international smuggling and customs frauds. It also keeps liaison with the international agencies of other countries in anti-smuggling matters. It also keeps the stats of seizures, watches trends, and passes on the information to the relevant ministries. And as DGTI is conducting, it also suggests policy measures to the government as far as it relates to the customs on narcotics. Moving on to the next slide, it will be very interesting to note that though these agencies are actually performing and acting in the field at the ground level, how these agencies are getting the data which they need to churn out or initiate investigation. So here is this body, which is a directorate called Directorate General of Analytics and Risk Management, DGARM short. It was newly formed during the GST regime. And it's an apex body under CBIC for data analytics and risk management for customs, central excise, and GST matters. It is also known as the data wing of GST, as it provides intelligence inputs and carry out big data analytics to assist the officers, tax officers, for the better policy formulation and nabbing evaders. Now, it will be interesting to note that DGARM basically churns out all the data which is available through the various portals and sources under the government of India, and with the help of AI, ML, and the tools available thereof, it basically comes out with the information and the red flags and the triggers, which are then shared with various agencies under the CBIC. Now, it works in close coordination with the Director General of Systems and Data Management, with DRI, with DGTI, with the DG Audit, and the Director General of Valuation. Now, all these are apex bodies, agencies of the Government of India, whose sole role is to see to it that the revenue is augmented, the evasions, the loopholes are plugged. And DGRM is the central body which provides them with the fodder to work on this. The chart, which is on the screen right now displayed, shows the various verticals under DGRM, along with their functions. Let's move on to the next slide, please. Generally, the term investigation evokes a sense of unease in the minds of people. Nobody is comfortable with the term investigation. So let us try to understand as to why investigations are initiated by various agencies under CBIC and how they are triggered. Now, there can be various reasons why an investigation is triggered against the businesses. Now, usually these are triggered due to some red flags or outliers which are popped up against the businesses. Now, these triggers can happen due to many reasons. For example, specific information provided by informers to the department, to investigation agencies or intelligence agencies, along with the documentary evidence, which is the primary source. Apart from that, the intelligence is also gathered through information available in the public domain or by the personal efforts by the officers of the investigation and intelligence agencies. Another important aspect to note here is that various government agencies, working under the government, the central government or the state government, they work in close coordination in exchanging the data. For example, the agencies like DRI, the Enforcement Directorate, the DG Investigation of Income Tax Department, DGTI, Narcotics Control Bureau, CBI, all these agencies, which may be having different functions or different subject matters to look into, but they still work in tandem and in close coordination with each other. For it may so happen that a case detected by one agency may have a bearing on some other cases which may be relevant to some other agency. For example, if a case is detected by DRI under the Customs Act, the DGTI may be interested in that, because any evasion of customs or customs duty may have a possible impact on the GST as well. Similarly, if CBI investigating some case of fraud definitely it may have some impact on the under the GST as well. DG investigation investigates income tax evasion cases. Now, if somebody has reported X amount in their income tax returns, and that amount does not match with what they have reported in their GST returns, this may be a cause of trigger. So at least these agencies can start the investigations. What happens afterwards is a different story. That is based on the facts of the case. But however, this is how the investigations are usually triggered. Another important source of these triggers is the various returns which are filed. As I just mentioned, that we file various returns and income tax, we file shipping bills and bills of entry under customs, we file various numerous returns under GST. Now, all this information, this data is available with the government and agencies like DGRM, with the use of the tools and the technology in its hand, is very much in a position to churn out and throw the outliers or the red flags. So this is how the investigations or inquiries are usually triggered under the indirect taxes. Moving on to the next slide, it's a very basic thing where we need to understand as to whether the statute empowers these agencies or the offices of these agencies to carry out the job which we are talking about. Oh yes, the statute very much empowers the officers under the CBIC to carry out the functions of search and seizure, of inspection of premises and vehicles, the search and seizure of the premises and the goods, as well as properties, the power to summon the relevant people to record their statements and tender evidence. They can access any business premises under the reasonable belief if they have a cause to suspect any kind of evasion. And the most important being, they also have power to arrest. So I guess these are factors are something which empowers these agencies to carry out their work, and the statute empowers them. I'll take a pause here for a polling question. Over to you, Hardik.
Thank you, Vikram. That was pretty interesting. So we have the first polling question and that is, what according to you is the most critical aspect to understand in investigation or an audit that is being undertaken by the authorities? Is it the source of information, the nature of the information, the strategy to handle the way forward, all of the above, or probably you're not sure? So we'll take a minute to have the respond to the polls.
While the polls are underway, Hardik, it will be really interesting to note that how the investigation techniques have evolved in the indirect tax department over the years. You see, when few decades back, the department had to rely on the basic ground intelligence, the footwork by the officers, because the technology was not so evolved. But as the time has grown and the technology has evolved, the department has access to some very, very specialized tools, and with the help of these, they're able to detect the cases of evasion with ease and accuracy, and that's why the quantum of inquiries has gone up tremendously.
Absolutely, I completely agree, Vikram, and I think the response to the poll is also pretty much clear that yes, everything is important: the source of the information, nature of the information, and even strategizing the approach for the way forward for handling an audit or an investigation is pretty much important. So that's a fair response to the poll. So we move on, Vikram, with the next section of the presentation.
Yeah, moving on to the next slide. Let us understand what are the parameters for investigations and audits. I mean, how these are picked up. Now, to understand this, I would like to highlight that The department, the GSTN department, has developed various business intelligence and fraud analytics tools. We'll call them BIFA for short. Now, on the basis of artificial intelligence and machine learning capabilities to identify any red flags and outliers or inconsistencies in the data reported by the taxpayers through various GST returns or other filings. Now, you see, we file various returns under the GST, GSTR1, GSTR 3B, GSTR 9, GSTR 9C. All these are returns which are filed periodically with the GSTN. Now, GSTN, the back end, with the help of these tools, churns out the data, compares it, and then comes out with the red flags or the gaps which may arise, and these tools then eventually lead to initiation of an inquiry or an investigation by the field formation. Now, moving on to the next, the next slide, how these tools are used by BIFA to carry out, how they are compared. Now, essentially, the tools analyze the data provided by the taxpayers through multiple returns filed by the taxpayers and the associate vendors or customers to identify any gaps in payment of tax. Now, for example, to name a few, the expense ratio versus the turnover ratio is something which the tool will pick up and compare. Now, it will also carry out deep data analytics and on the client data, which is available to them. And basis that, there could be some outliers. Now, whether the returns were filed within the due dates or not could also be a trigger point for initiation. Then, supply chain and related party analysis is also an important factor which can be taken up into consideration. If you are having transactions with your related parties, then there could be ramifications under the cross charge, etc. We'll be discussing some more instances on this topic as we move forward. Now, very basic one could be the mismatches between the returns which we have already filed, like the information provided under your GSTR1, which is your outward liability statement which you submit, and the GSTR 3B, that is the return under which you actually pay the GST, if there are any gaps under that. Similarly, that is on the outward side. On the inward side, there could be mismatches between the GSTR 28/2B with GSTR 3B. The input tax credit which you should have availed and which you have actually availed is a very common reason why the authorities throw a red flag on this. Similarly, the e-way bill data, now that's a different domain altogether. The e-way bill data is available and the system itself carries out comparison with the GSTR1 details submitted by us. And if there are any missing links, then it immediately throws off the red flag to the authorities to carry out more detailed investigation. Similarly, there is something called network exploration tool for revenue augmentation. This is called Netra. Now, this tool is developed by DGRM and is used for network analysis of risky suppliers. Now, there are certain risky suppliers which they have identified on the basis of the nature of the supplies, on the basis of their background, etc. And this tool now gives immediately compares it with the data submitted by you, and if there are some red flags, it raises the same issue. Similarly, integrated data sharing and artificial intelligence plays a very vast role in carrying out this investigation. Now, these are just indicative lists of, there are multiple such issues which can be compared, multiple such triggers which can occur and give a reason for the authorities to cause an inquiry. These are just a few. I'll take a pause here, Hardik, for the next polling question. Over to you.
Sure, Vikram. Thank you. So we have the next polling question, and that is, which aspect according to you is the most important for business? Uniformity in statutory filings, timely compliance, uniformity in financial data and statutory filings, or all of the above, or probably you're not sure. So let's see the response to the polling question. I think in the meanwhile, while they're getting a response to the poll, one of the point which even I thought probably to mention over here, when you talk about analytics, is probably this time around, government has a lot of data at the transaction level. In the erstwhile regime, which is service tax, central excise, and in VAT in few states, the returns used to be filed by and large on a summary level. But now under GST, all these transactions, the returns are filed at a transaction level. So the government has essentially data for 5 years at a transaction level for both the supplier and the receiver. With the level of analytics and the technology which the government has implemented, probably they are by far ahead of the businesses in terms of the curve for them to churn the analytics and throw it up to highlight any red flags or the outliers, and probably take this data point to initiate an investigation, or probably even harsher steps such as search or seizure for that matter. Audit parameters are also by and large being defined, but then these are also the data points which are being used to initiate audits for at least for the large corporations where there are clearly some of the red flags or outliers. One of the important aspect also which needs to be sort of considered over here is that when there are cross-functional, cross-departmental body, which is say DGRM, which is the oversight kind of a body which provides the data. Normally, in a very practical way, the way it happens is, suppose there is a commissioner of GST, we will have a commissioner of customs, we will have a commissioner of income tax. They will have a joint meeting, and if there is any issue which has been reported from income tax, which has ramifications for customs and GST, it is more or less an obligation that the commissioner of customs and GST have to investigate the matter and then reporting back to the commissioner of income tax that, look, these are the actions which they have taken on that specific issue. So the closure, is at various levels. And this is very important to know that normally one would expect that things could get closed at a lower level, but no, with the number of levels and with multiple departments involved, the closure generally now takes time. And the closure, as I said, goes right up to DGRM and the commissioners in their joint meetings, which normally is being held either monthly or bi-monthly. So just thought to share that practical insight. So we have answers to the poll, and yes, everything is important. Uniformity in filings as well as the financial data with the filings is pretty much important, with 80% of the participating responding to that answer. That's great. So we move on to the next section, which is audits under GST. Thank you.
Thanks, Hardik, for that insightful observation. Now, let's understand as to what is audit under GST and what are the various types of audit under GST. Now, broadly, audit under GST is the process of examination of records, returns, and other documents maintained by a taxable person. So the purpose is to verify the correctness of turnovers declared, the taxes paid, the refunds claimed, the input tax credit availed, and to assess the compliance with various provisions of GST. Now, the chart on the screen basically depicts the various types of audits which are undertaken by the department. Now, you can see that the department can conduct the audit through its own officers, or it can also direct on the basis of some specific information or some specific information which was unearthed during an inquiry or investigation. They can direct a special audit to be carried out by a chartered accountant or a cost accountant. So these are the types of audits which are usually undertaken. Moving on to the next slide. Let's now talk about how to prepare and strategize for preparation of audits and investigations. When I'm talking about audits and investigation, we'll be interchangeably using this term because more or less once they are initiated, the process remains the same. It's the mode, is the way in which the two are initiated probably could be different. For example, when an audit is initiated, you are given a notice of 15 days or a month or so prior intimation, whereas investigations are surprise elements. So therefore, it is that's the only basic difference, that how they are initiated. But once they are probably they may proceed further on the same lines. Of course, audits are more detailed and record based. Anyway, so here let us understand how we can strategize for audits and investigations. So when an investigation is initiated, the most basic and important step is to get the clarity about the case in order to prepare an action plan. Now, while the IO can expand the scope of investigation if they come across any additional issues during the investigations, it will really help to understand as to what is the reason, what is the trigger point they have come for. And usually this happens during the course of these inquiries when they are conducted. You get an idea as to where the officer is going on, what he's looking for, and which will give you an indicator as to what is the probable cause of investigation. So having understood that, it gives you some idea and a point to think over and to strategize and to again plan your way forward. So understanding a case is very important. Now we know that investigations are very stressful, and therefore it is very important to remain calm and composed during the investigations. Those who have never faced an investigation or an inquiry may find it really shaking. Because they are not used to it, and therefore nowadays, because of these outliers, these red flags being thrown out by the department, which may have actually some bearing on your case. Genuinely, there some tax may not have been paid, or probably you have a valid reason for not paying the tax, or there is some gap in even in the information available with the department, but that comes afterwards. The fact that a trigger has been set off, the officers are at your doorstep, and an investigation has begun, indeed it's a cause of stress. So the first and foremost thing we will suggest is that to remain calm and composed during the investigation inquiry when it is being carried out. At times, the IOs can try to intimidate and put pressure to accept certain tax liabilities. Now, these are very relative incidents, in fact, and depend on case to case basis. I mean, we cannot say that one hat fits all the hats. You will have to take a call depending on your case. At times, you realize that indeed there was some tax which was required to be paid and you somehow missed it. It's better to come clean and pay it off along with interest and get rid of it. But if you feel that it's an issue of technical nature and it may require intervention or maybe decided at a higher judicial forum, yes, you have all the right to put forward that, accept the notice from the officer and fight it out as per your basis your documents or facts which are available with you. But the bottom line here is that all endeavors should be made or should be towards completion of the investigations at the earliest, because till the time the investigations are going on, for whatever reason, there is always a scope of some more in-depth analysis being carried out and something more coming out of it. And of course, disruption of business and time, etc., is something which also happens during these investigations. So whenever an officer or IO calls for any information, it's in our interest to collate and submit all the information, all the facts which are asked by him at the earliest. This will help the officer to come to conclusion as to what he's investigating, and he is then free to issue a show cause notice once he's satisfied that he has seen all the documents. Either he can close the investigation or he can issue a show cause notice if we are not agreeing to the contention made by the officer. The idea is to have the show cause notice issued at the earliest so that you can move on to the next level. So I will take a pause here for the next polling question. Over to you, Hardik.
Thank you. So the next polling question is, which aspect, according to you, bothers the most during an audit or investigation taken by the authorities? Abrupt visit by the officers, disruption of business, stressful situation due to lack of preparedness, or all of the above? All right, so we have the response and it's all of the above. Rather, I would say, Vikram, I'll put it on the fourth bucket, or rather one more bucket, which is stressful situation on the finance and the tax teams to handle an investigating officer and keeping the regular compliance and the other work aside. That creates more stress later on. So that's perhaps is the most stressful thing whenever there is an investigation. And yes, of course, the other thing is the disruption of business when they come and probably seal your offices or conference rooms, maybe stand there for about a week or 10 days and have to attend them for a week or 10 days. It's really stressful because generally the way it happens is, in my practical experiences, during the day you end up handing out the information to the officers, handling the queries and the objections, and once they leave, probably in the late evening, that's the time when you have to start preparing for the next day, right? And that goes right in the till the middle of the night. So that creates a lot of stress rather than anything else.
Yeah, very true, Hardik. In fact, that's what
that's
probably
about...
taking a cue from what you just mentioned, that usually these searches and investigations at times prolong for many days, weeks, in fact. And the reason or probably how we can try to mitigate this could be the solution could be in my next slides. So over to the next slide, please. Now, it is very, very important for us, for businesses, to be prepared in advance. You see, for any such exigency which may arise in future due to an audit or investigation. Now, we have just highlighted a few areas where the businesses can take a cue and prepare themselves. You might have realized that the officers come and they give a bucket list of information and they want everything as of yesterday. Of course, they are under pressure to conclude their proceedings and come to some conclusion at the earliest. And unless and until they have the information, they won't be in a position to take a stand. And therefore, when we get that bucket list, we get overwhelmed. The best way to tackle such situation is to be prepared in advance. Now, how to be prepared in advance? Now, there are certain things which are very common as far as the investigations or audits are concerned. For example, if we take outward supplies, there are questions which may be related to reconciliation of your outward supplies as disclosed in your GSTR returns, GSTR 1 or GSTR 3B. Now, these details, if we have readily prepared well in advance, you can simply provide it to the officers so they can go through them. You can prepare the reconciliation of your tax paid as per your financials and as per your GST returns. You can prepare RICO of your outward supplies as per the books of accounts and as per what you reported in your GST return. Similarly, reconciliation of e-way bill generated along with the GST returns. RICO of e-way bills with your books of accounts. RICO of e-invoices with your e-way bills. Similarly, RICO of turnover as per your financials and as per your GST returns. And RICO of tax paid on monthly basis with the liability declared in the returns. Now, these are some basic issues which may be pertaining to the outward liabilities. There could be more depending on the businesses and the nature of business. If these things are prepared in advance, it will save a lot of time and trouble. Moving on to the next slide, while we have talked about the outward supply, similar preparation can be made on the inward side as well regarding the input tax credit, which is a major area where the authorities seek a lot of information. So you can keep your RICO of ITC availed as per books and the ITC availed as per your returns readily available. RICO of monthly ITC as per books and ITC as appearing in the GSTR 2A. Now, as you understand or maybe aware that recently the board had issued a circular regarding mismatches of input tax credit under 2A vis-a-vis or 3B for the financial years 17-18 and 18-19. And they have given, since the system was still evolving at that point of time, there were a lot of mismatches. And therefore, the government has given a leeway in that and given a process how you can regularize such credits. Now, for 17-18, 18-19, it is fine. 19-20, it is not the case. In fact, some High Court has given a ruling that even for 1920 such benefit should be given. But that may not be the case for subsequent years. So it's always better to have a reconciliation prepared well in advance, so you are prepared for such kinds of inquiries. Similarly, RICO of ineligible ITC as per books and ineligible ITC as you have disclosed in your returns, in your GST returns. Details of ITC attributable to taxable supplies and to the exempted supplies, and whether you have made the reversals. Then the invoice-wise details of ITC reverse in the GST returns, and the bifurcation of ITC of inputs, input services, capital goods. So all these factors would be required to be kept ready. There could be more, but these are some broad categories which we find that the businesses should be ready and prepared well before even anybody walks into their door. Moving on to the next slide, there are various issues pertaining to reverse charge which are coming up nowadays. So there are various supplies under which the businesses are required to pay GST as a recipient. So you need to keep a record of RCM paid, which is as per the books, and the RCM which is as per the returns. If there is a gap, it needs to be filled up. Now, line itemized details of the wherever the RCM liability has been discharged, those details we need. The officers are asking details of ITC availed on the tax paid under RCM. So whether that matches with what we have paid or it is something different. If not, then why? The reasons thereof. Now, line itemized details of ITC is which is not availed on tax paid under RCM. Wherever we have not availed, then what's the reason thereof? And if there are any ITC which are being availed, RCM which is paid in respect of unregistered persons, that is only for the period up to 13th October 2017. But yes, so reverse charge mechanism is an important factor. In fact, we need to see that there are a lot of related parties with whom you may have had some transactions, and there may not have been any consideration paid. So whether RCM has been discharged on such supplies. Moving on to the next slide, there are some having understood that what are these issues and how we can prepare ourselves. Certain areas which we would like to highlight here is that to be prepared for audits and investigations well in advance, it is very important to have a regular GST health checkups to identify potential gaps in the systems and compliances. And similarly, preparations of SOPs and standard operating procedures for various compliances which we carry out, and reassessing positions on the basis of the development to ensure that all the records and documents are kept at the place of business. And we need to have a complete standard preparation which is required for audit. All the data and reconciliation should be kept readily available at all the places of businesses. And what important aspect which I mentioned is to have a regular GST checkup, a health check kind of thing, so that you can plug the gaps and take the corrective actions wherever required. Moving on to the next, on strategizing during audits and investigations. Now, a very important aspect is to understand that audits which are carried out are at the place of business, and usually you get a 15 to 20 days notice for that. Investigations necessarily start at the place of business only, and there is no prior notice given to it. They are usually surprise checks, in fact. So the thing to remember is you need to avoid unnecessary confrontation with the officer. And you, as far as possible, all the facts and figures which are there should be submitted to the officers at the earliest. This will help them in understanding the case. And if they are in line, then we can even avoid the show cause notices. And whatever backups, reconciliation, etc. are available with us, we need to share it with the officers to give them a more clarity about our businesses. Moving on to the next slide. So as I said, we need to also remember that under GST, you need to have registration under various states and union territories. And usually the businesses have one central office, which takes care of the tax part. So it is important to have the details of each GST registration available at those respective jurisdictional offices, so that whenever an officer comes, an authority comes, the information is readily available and there is no confusion about the presence in that particular premises or not. Similarly, you need to reassess and the tax positions which you have taken earlier on and recalibrate yourself to ensure that you are in compliance with the statutory requirements. And a regular professional advice and review is a must going forward, considering the nature of complexity under the law. I'll take a pause here for the next polling question. Over to you, Hardik.
Sure. Thank you, Vikram. So the next polling question is, do you think if the taxes are paid along with interest during investigation, will the authorities close the proceedings? Yes, no, or not sure?
So, Hardik, while we are waiting for the poll results, it's very interesting to note, and nowadays we are observing this across the
Yes,
country,
Vikram.
that various jurisdictional authorities have simultaneously started audits because we almost 5 years past the GST inception, and they are in a hurry to complete. So, if just imagine if you have got 35 registrations, and out of that, the authorities have initiated audits in 15 states, it's a nightmare for the businesses. And I'm sure many of our attendees must be facing these difficulties.
Absolutely.
So the only solution, I guess, is to be prepared well in advance going forward. Otherwise, you cannot cope up with so many pressures, so many audits happening at the same time, because your tax team is common. So your thoughts about it, Hardik?
No, absolutely agree. And on the top of it, actually, there are investigations also which happen simultaneously. So, which I'll reserve that question probably at the last to have your views. So, at the moment, the polling seems to be, fairly even. So, Vikram, over to you to probably respond to this question.
Yeah, I mean, the audience is probably of equal view about whether the investigations are closed or on payment or not. It's a very relative term. As I said, one rule cannot fit all. It depends on the case to case basis. Moving on to the next, we'll just take quickly through the common issues which are being picked up by the authorities nowadays. These issues pertain to maybe nature of supply, whether it is taxable or exempt or mixed or composite, and basis that issues are being picked up. ITC availment and reversal, errors in the returns and the corrections which have carried out give red flags. Now, capital goods and their ITC treatment, how we have dealt with. Are we dealing the ITC on capital goods at par with inputs and input services? That because it is different for capital goods. So that is one thing which is being picked up. Now, transaction with group companies, treatment of advances and tax payments, receipt of export proceeds and claim of refund. These are some of the factors which are being picked up. Now, moving on to the next slide, I'll just give you a walkthrough on few industry-specific issues. Recently, there was an issue on RCM liability on secondment of employees. This is one aspect which everybody, each business needs to look into, because even the Supreme Court has held this in favor of the department, and whether we are complying with this. Now, various discount schemes are being provided, whether they are in line with the statute, whether RCM liability on the usage of royalty, if any, is being, even if you are not paying any royalty, but if you are having some transactions wherein you are using, say, brand or the logo of your related party, whether GST is being discharged on that, even if no consideration is involved. Then if you are involved in destruction of your finished goods, for example, pharmaceutical goods, more relevant to pharma goods or the food products, if you're destroying it, whether you're reversing the ITC appropriately, and whether you're applying the GST rates appropriately. These are some of the issues. Moving on to the next slide quickly, just a few case studies which will help you understand the issues raised nowadays. We have picked up an issue which is being raised by the DGTI on non-payment of GST on brand royalty. So apparently, if you, as I said, if you have any related party for whose you are using the brand name or the technical know-how or a logo, even if you are not making any payment to them, if it is based abroad or anywhere, then also the RCM is applicable. This has been picked up and a lot of recoveries are happening on this ground. Moving on to the next slide, this case is again a DGTI case wherein the issue of secondment of employees has been picked up. As I mentioned earlier on, now they're armed with the Supreme Court judgment on this, and they are going to everybody who is getting employees on secondment from their related entities, and accordingly they are asking them to pay up the taxes. So these are some of the aspects which we wanted to highlight under the case studies. I'll just take a pause here, Hardik, and we can move on to our last polling question. Over to you.
Sure. I think, Vikram, we are at the Q&A. So we'll open the floor for the audience for the question and answers. There are some 4 questions in the chat box, so also which we'll try and address. So Vikram, you want to take the questions in the chat box? You're on mute, Vikram.
Oh, I'm so sorry,
Vikram,
Hardik.
you're on mute.
Yeah. Am I audible now? Hello, am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, the question, one question
Yes,
is that
Vikram.
is there any due date for department to close departmental audit under Section 65? No, the thing is, departmental audit undertaken by them, they are always under a pressure. There is no timeline set as such, but they're required to complete it and issue show cause notice if required, well within the timelines prescribed by the department, by the statute. So yeah, I mean, there is a timeline in terms of issuance of a show cause notice. That's how it is. But we see that usually these audits go on for quite some time unless and until they are under a pressure to issue a notice. Now, for GST brand fee, can you please give a valuation mechanism? Okay, valuation mechanism, we'll have to go by the valuation rules under GST for deciding the brand fee. And if you're entitled for the 100% input tax credit, then the value can always be accepted by the department. That's what the statute say. How do you keep ready the state-wise trial balances that the department usually asks? Yes, this is a very, very challenging question because many of the state audits are asking for trial balances. It becomes particularly difficult for the service industry who do not have these details readily available. So this is something which probably businesses will have to look into and see as to how best you can satisfy the officer. Maybe you can give them a purchase and sales register, some line item wise or summary, and if that satisfies them, that should be fine, because usually TBs are maintained at the entity level. Is there a okay.
Probably, Vikram, we can go with the first question, which is what are the rights of the assessee in case... Hello, Vikram, you can go with the first question, which is what are the rights of the assessee in case if the investigating officers are going wild and behave nasty?
Oh, yes. So, okay. That's why I said, sir, that investigations are usually a painful exercise. And while the behavior of the officers at times is a bit more, they're more edgy and they're more aggressive. Remember one thing, that you have all the rights, and as a citizen of India, nobody can harass you. And the thing is, they have to follow the law of the land. They cannot harass you perennially. But having said that, practically we face some different situations altogether. So that is why remaining calm and composed is a must. and to see to it that if he's being unreasonable, then there are various remedies available with you, which you can take recourse to, maybe escalating the matter, or trying to reason out with the officer first. If not, then maybe escalating the matter to the higher ups, and other such remedies are available. But as far as possible, the question here is to see to it that the investigation gets completed at the earliest. Yeah, Hardik, I think.
So I'll take up one question. I'll take up one question from Ravi Shankar, which is whether for the same period, different investigating wing can do audit. So let me share some practical insight on this, Ravi. One is that for one of the company which I know of and which we have been handling audits as well as investigation, they have for the last 5 years audit being initiated by the central tax authorities. At the same point of time, they also got the investigation notice from the state tax authorities. And parallelly, they also got a notice from the central tax authorities for investigating for the same period by the central tax authorities. So now if you see, there is an audit under Section 65, which has been initiated for the last 5 years by the central tax, which is their nodal jurisdiction. Then you have investigation notices from both central tax as well as from state tax. This is unfortunately the reality. Now, in 2018, the board clarified that if the central tax authorities have, or if rather, for the matter of fact, if any tax authorities, be it central tax or for the matter state tax, have initiated an investigation for a particular period and for a particular issue, then that particular authority or an agency which has initiated the investigation has to bring or has to close the issue and bring it to a logical conclusion. Say, for example, if the central tax authorities have initiated investigation for a particular period and for a particular issue, then the state tax authorities are precluded by virtue of that circular to initiate investigation for that particular period and for that issue. Okay. So that's one. Secondly, these matters have also gone to the courts, and the courts have also taken a view that, look, if investigating authority, be it a central or a state tax, they have already initiated investigation for a particular period and for a particular issue, then the other agency, which is a state or center, vice versa, cannot actually initiate investigation or for that same period and for that same issue. Now, the catch over here is the circular clarifies that it has to be for the same issue and not necessarily for the same period. So there is a possibility that at least for the same period, the center and the state tax, if they have specific information on a different issue, may investigate you or may carry out investigation, inspection, search, or seizure for that same period, but for a different issue. So that is quite a possibility. Can investigation and audit be opened by the department and investigation field simultaneously? Yes, I mean, in reality, we have seen this, that, as I said, in one of the live case, audit has been initiated by the department from central tax, and the state tax now also started with the investigation. Again, there are court cases where the matters have gone to the court, and the courts have held that both should not be held simultaneously. But it all depends at how are we managing this at the ground level. So this whole aspect of simultaneously carrying out investigations by the central tax, state tax, and even audits for that matter is something which is being brought to the attention of the board. The board is contemplating on it as to how do we handle it, and it's something which will take time to see how there will be a structure or a framework for carrying out investigations for the same period for an SSE. As a matter of fact, one can imagine that if the nodal jurisdiction is, say, for example, with the central tax for a particular state, then the central tax can carry out a audit under Section 65, investigation, inspection, or search and seizure under Section 67. Then the state tax authorities can also carry out investigation, search, seizure, inspection, and then you have another wing which is anti-evasion, which from the state and the state from the central and the state tax, which can also carry out their own inquiries and investigation. So one can imagine that simultaneously you may have about 3 to 4 agencies being either auditing or investigating at the same time for a particular state. Then we have for 1718 matching concept of ITC as per books was not present. But while issuing notice from the department audit, such reconciliation is demanded. Yes, that's true. For 1718 and 1819 matching concept, I mean, it was all provisional and it was not, it was GSTI 2A, 2B was not even present at that point of time. Department does insist on submitting the reconciliation for that particular period. Now we have the recent circular as to how one can actually manage the GST ITC mismatch issues for 1718 and 1819. Now there are certain questions also around the circular whether that is valid as per the provisions of the law or not. But practically what we have seen is that if you don't submit, then probably it's very simple for the department to issue a show cause and then have the matter litigated. We will not go into the merits right now, whether it's a defendable issue or not. But from an audit point of view, we would recommend that we should give the reconciliation and get out of this issue.
And what is interesting, Hardik,
then
is that
on
Karnataka High
certain
Court has given
points
a
such as
favorable.
brand royalty. Yes.
Karnataka High Court has given some
That's
favorable judgment for the subsequent year also, that is 1920 also. So that the same circular can be made applicable. So I mean, this is evolving. This is a new circular. It's evolving. Let's see how it proceeds.
Absolutely. So, and then we have for question number 4, is there a correct answer to this? So the technical answer to this question is that if the tax is paid along with interest prior to issuance of the show cause notice or the demand notice, so as to say, and there is no allegation with respect to suppression of fraud, willful misstatement, etc., which are the graver offenses, then that particular issue can stand closed, provided the tax and the interest has been paid before issuance of show cause notice, and the penalty will be waived off. So, and then there are certain questions on the rate of tax, probably which will try and respond it over the email. So, and happy to take any questions around audits and investigations. All right. So thanks, Vikram. This brings us to the end of our today's discussion. So Vikram, thank you. And special thanks to all of you who were able to join us. We would like to encourage you to fill out a short survey that will pop up on your screen momentarily and tell us what you think about today's program. If you joined us late, please note that this presentation will be archived for future viewing. If you feel that others would benefit from this webcast, please share the webcast via share this icon or have them visit the debriefs website. We will respond to all the questions submitted during the webcast in a couple of weeks. Also, if you think any of the questions or comments later, please feel free to reach out either to me or to our speakers. We will be more than happy to talk to you. And please don't forget to tune in to our next scheduled webcast from the Geography Updates on 2nd February, titled Union Budget 2023, India's Spectrum of Opportunities. At last, from all of us at Deloitte, thank you for your participation in Deloitte's Asia Pacific Tax webcast today. Goodbye and thank you.
Thank you.